Hello everyone. Thank you for stopping by Sewing Machine Rehab today. I'm glad you're here. We are continuing on with our restoration series on a Singer 301. Today we are going to reinstall the feed dogs as well as the needle plate. And just really quick, if you are enjoying this content, I hope you will remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you're here for the first time, welcome. Anyway, let's carry on. So we removed all these parts at the very beginning of the series, and you should have cleaned them. I just want you to look at the feed dogs themselves really well before you put them back on the machine. If it helps you to get a magnifying glass out, check in between each of these little teeth and make sure that you got out all of the impacted lint if there was any. That will help the feed dogs grab your fabric and move it along and everything running smoothly. You'll have the feed dogs and the two little screws that hold the feed dogs down. You will need your needle plate, and you will need the screws to hold down your needle plate. Once we get these parts on, we will set the height to Singer's recommended setting for the feed dogs. So of course we want to put a little bit of oil on these parts before we get started, and all I do is just oil the actual threaded part of each screw. And then I also oil down in the holes where they're going to go. Just like this. Now the feed dogs sit on your machine with the teeth pointing towards the end of the machine. So it's easy to just lay your feed dogs down. And of course, I like to start all these screws with my fingers. Maybe we can give you a little better view here. Now, once you get those feed dogs started, you will need to go ahead and tighten them down. But you may have a little bit of difficulty getting your screwdriver into this tight little area here. Unfortunately, these two bushings for your needle bar and your presser bar are sort of in your way. So it helps to have a tool sort of like this. It just holds the bit inside for your screwdriver. Just like that. And then this one is ratcheting, and I never can remember which. There we go. So see how easy that is? I have the clearance that I need, and I can just screw this right down. I don't tighten one up and then tighten the other up. I sort of get them both fairly tight and then finish them up at the same time pretty much. And you want to tighten these down, but remember, these screws are the ones that can be damaged fairly easily. In fact, out of screws that I've had to replace, the feed dog screws are the most common. So don't overdo it. So now we have the feed dogs back onto the machine. And if you rotate your hand wheel, you should see them moving, and they should not be hitting the hook in any way. So I have the movement that I want, and nothing's coming in contact with the hook. Now I can install the needle plate. And when we put this needle plate on, we're going to have to pay attention. The way that it goes on is very obvious. It fits right into this groove. Before I screw anything down, I like to just hold it in place and turn my hand wheel and see if I'm getting any bumping, which I am right now. So I'll go ahead and put it on because maybe I didn't hold it in the perfect position. It's not bumping now. When you put this needle plate on, do you see this little gap right here? Do you see this little finger that sticks out of your hook assembly? It needs to be sandwiched in between that little gap. If you don't do that, your stitch will not be very nice. So let me show you what that looks like. There, you can see it. It's in between. It will have a little bit of play. Obviously the gap is bigger than the finger. So don't worry if it's a little wiggly. Once you get this finger sandwiched in between these two parts on the bottom of your needle plate, you can add your screws. Don't forget to give them a little bit of oil first. Okay, and you can just normally start these with your fingers. So this side shouldn't be very hard at all to screw down with the screwdriver. This side is always a little bit more difficult, so be careful. And a lot of times I'll get it mostly screwed down, but then if I want to snug it up, I go ahead and I use this tool. There. Both are nice and tight. Now I want to spin my hand wheel again, and I'm wondering if the feed dogs are going to hit inside these cutouts on the needle plate at all or not. No, everything's fine. There's not any problems. If you do have any rubbing and you feel resistance, even if your feed dogs still come up and down, take the needle plate off and put it back on again. Sometimes that's all it takes. I also like to go in reverse because depending on the feed dogs and how they're set, if they are coming too far forward before they start to come up, that first little part in front of the teeth can actually hit the bottom of your needle plate. Everything seems fine. So, what's the last thing I have to do? Well, I need to check the height of my feed dogs. So there are a couple things you need to remember when you check the height of your feed dogs. First of all, the 301 has the ability to totally lower the feed dogs and get them out of your way. So it's not going to do me any good to test or check the height of these feed dogs unless I have them fully engaged so they are supposed to be coming all the way up to the highest point possible. If I have this little knob here turned even just a little bit counterclockwise, I'm not getting the true height of the feed dogs that I need to set it. So watch this. This little knob turns counterclockwise. Did you see the feed dogs go away? I can turn the hand wheel. No feed dogs. This is perfect for someone who wants to free motion quilt, for example. Now, if I turn it all the way back, do you see them slowly start to come up? Now I'm looking at the feed dogs, and this is turned as far clockwise as it will go. Now I am seeing what is the full height of the feed dogs, at least for how this machine is set right now. So let's talk about this. Singer says to set your feed dog height at 0.043 inches. Well, that's pretty precise. So what do? Well, for me, I purchased a feeler gauge, and this is what a feeler gauge looks like. These come bolted on this little holder, and there's so many different sizes. So if I take, for example, my 0.025 and my 0.018, so here we are, 0.025, this is millimeters, this is inches. If I take this one and my 0.018, which is this one, and I put them together, then I will have 0.043 inches. So this is what I'm going to use to check the height of my feed dogs. I'm going to literally take my sewing machine and turn the hand wheel, have the feed dogs at the highest point, which you will see it. It's right about here. I zoomed in a little bit for you there. So I have them in about the highest point. Which is right about there. I take these two feeler gauges stacked together and I lay them up against the feed dogs while they're at the highest point. And I want to make sure that I do this right. I want to make sure that both feeler gauges are up against the edge of the feed dog. If this top one just slides over it, then I know they're too low. But I have 1, 2. Now what I'm doing is I'm feeling, and I can use my nail, I can use anything that's just a slim edge, and I'm just running it over the top of the two feeler gauges together to the teeth. And what I'm feeling is that actually this thickness is higher than how far my feed dogs are coming up. So what that means is that I need to adjust the height on these feed dogs in order to get them to the factory setting. And it doesn't matter if I feel in the front or if I feel in the back, or if I feel in the front. Definitely these feed dogs are not coming up to the height that Singer recommends. Now, I did a little bit of research to see if I could suggest anything else that would be close to 0.043 inches. And of course, the standard go-to would be, what about some of the US coins or something like that? There isn't anything that I could find that is 0.043 inches or very, very close to that. So if anyone has something that they use that works, I would love to know what you do if you don't have a feeler gauge handy. And I would say that I would always maybe go just a smidge higher than 0.043 inches, because I can always lower the feed dogs by turning this little dial here on the end. So that's an easy thing to remedy. To get them higher than their highest setting, obviously you can't do without adjusting them. So what I'm going to show you to do is how to adjust the height of your feed dogs, whether you need to make them a little bit lower because they're too high, or you need to make them higher. I will show you how to do that now. So did you guess that we will be looking at the bottom of the machine again? Well, we are. And just for the record, pretty much every 301 I work on, the feed dog height needs at least a little minimal adjusting. So don't panic if your feed dogs aren't set to the proper height. You can fix this. Where we're going to be working today is with this little nut right here in the end of this screw. You will need to find a wrench that fits onto this nut, and you will need a nice hefty screwdriver to go into the slot of the screw. And actually I am just entering it in. Do you see my finger here? This is a hole on the end of the machine. It's where my plug for my foot controller will eventually go. That is what I'm using to access this. So I'm going to take my screwdriver and slide it through the hole, put it into the slotted end of the screw, and I'm going to loosen this nut. So if you're confused about which way to turn the nut, put your wrench on, and I'm sorry if that puts it out of focus, put your wrench on and twist it up towards the front of the machine, and then you will be loosening it, and then twisting it down towards the back of the machine will be how you tighten it. Now, once I have this nut loose, I should be able to, with my screwdriver, rotate that screw slot. So, now what? Let's turn the machine around. And by the way, Singer says to set your stitch length at about an 8 when you're doing this. So if you can remember to do that, it's not a bad idea. But first, what I'm doing is I'm rotating my hand wheel and I'm getting my feed dogs into their highest position, which is about right here. And I think you can see them. Now, I'm going to reach behind the machine and I'm going to twist that screw, and I want you to watch right here. Do you see them disappearing? Do you see them coming back up? That's me turning that screw head and changing the height of the feed dogs. However I set this screw, once I lock down that nut again, that will be my feed dogs at the highest point. So let's just see where I am at right now. So I'm putting both of my feeler gauges up and I'm running my fingertip across the teeth of the feed dogs to my feeler gauge. And honestly, they're just about perfect. I thought they were high, but they're not. They're right where I want them to be. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to turn my hand wheel or anything like that. Instead, I'm going to spin the machine around so you can see. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the angle of the slot on this screw head. I want to just kind of get a visual of how it's turned, in case I bump it out of place or something while I'm tightening up the nut. Then I'm going to put my screwdriver into the slot, and while I hold it steady, I'm going to take my little wrench, just about lost my wrench, and I'm going to tighten the nut by turning it down towards the back of the machine. Make sure that you hold your screwdriver firm and you don't let the head of that screw turn. It stays in the same position. All you're doing is locking down the nut. Let's check my work and see if I got the feed dogs set to the right height. So I have my machine turned around. I'm pulling my feed dogs up into their highest position, which is about right here. I have my feeler gauge, setting it down flat on the needle plate, pushing it up against the teeth, and I'm running my fingernail. You could use the end of your screwdriver. Some people like to use a razor blade. I'm just looking to see, do I feel any transition between the two? And I do not. So this is a pretty precise measurement. This is what I want you to know. Don't panic if it's not perfect. You need to make sure that those feed dogs are coming up high enough when you have this turned all the way clockwise that it's going to grab whatever fabric you're working with and pull it through. You need to be able to lower them all the way whenever you turn this counterclockwise so they disappear. If it's not exact, do not worry. You can always lower them if they feel like they're a little high. The main thing you want to look for is when your feed dogs are at the highest setting, that they're not just barely popping up over the top of the needle plate. And I'd like to know other people's thoughts on this. Maybe someone would disagree, and I understand that. But for the average person who's just trying to fix something like this on their machine at home, do not panic if it's not exactly 0.043 inches. At least you know how to raise and lower them to get it to work for you. So there, that's it. That's how we do it. Now, you can also adjust the length of the feed dog. And what that means is that the stitch lever up in the front of the machine, if I have it set down at its longest stitch length, which is 6 per inch, which is where it is now, I'm turning the hand wheel. Watch how far the feed dogs travel. You see, they're going to considerable ways. That should be 6 stitches per inch. If I move it up to, let's say, 20, watch the feed dogs now. They're still coming up and down at the same height, but they're traveling a much smaller distance, hence a shorter, finer stitch. So why would you want to adjust the feed dog length? Well, reason number one, maybe these teeth are traveling actually so far forward that they're hitting inside the needle plate before they can fully come up, and you may not even be able to turn your hand wheel past a certain point. Or there have been times where I always strive to get 6 stitches per inch, and I'm not getting that. I'm getting 7 or 8. That's when I'll look at how to adjust the length of the feed dog so I can maximize the potential of this machine. Getting 6 stitches per inch is important because if you're sewing and you're a home sewist, being able to run a gathering stitch for ruffles or gathers in a garment or something like that, 6 stitches per inch is ideal for gathering fabric. So I always want to make sure that I can guarantee that. But if you wanted to adjust the length, what would you do? Well, I'm not going to tell you right now. And do you know why? Because I will check that whenever I finally get this machine all back together. I will sew with it and I will measure the length of the stitch. That is our fine tuning portion of this series. So if it needs to be adjusted, then I can adjust it then. Right now, I'm not set up to sew with this machine. I don't know if it would get exactly 6 stitches per inch until I get that needle in the fabric with the thread and everything else. So we will address that towards the end when we fine tune. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Please let me know if I missed anything today that you would have liked me to cover. And just thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you have a great day. Guess what's next? We're installing the presser bar and we're setting the height of the presser bar. See you real soon. Bye.